So, okay, now, some of you have seen this before, but I'm going to show it again. Maybe you haven't seen precisely this version of it, but this line of research wasn't piloted by Dan Simon, although he's done a tremendous amount to popularize it. His demonstrations have become some of the most famous demonstrations that psychologists have ever put together. And this particular line of investigation, although it might be old hat to you guys, perhaps, was an absolute staggering shock to everyone when it was first revealed, because the hypothesis was that, first of all, that we see the world pretty well, you know, and when we look at the world, we're seeing it in a relatively comprehensible manner, and that's wrong. And then the second hypothesis, which was a deeper hypothesis, is that even if we don't see the world that well, if something that's unexpected conceptually happens, our attention will be automatically drawn to it. And that also turns out to be wrong. So we're going to look at this video. And okay, so there's the gorilla. One person leaves, and then the curtain changes color. Right. So it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It really is. It's amazing, in fact. So, all right. So, you know, you look at that and you think, what do you think? If I'm concentrating on one thing, there's a lot of other things I'm missing, and some of those might be unbelievably massive. And then it's even worse, as Simon just demonstrated, which is, if I'm concentrating on one thing and I'm paying attention for the possibility that something strange might happen, while I'm watching for the strange thing, other strange things that I don't expect will happen, and I won't see them. All right, so I like that demonstration because it's such a concrete presentation of the fact that we're dealing with something complex with relatively limited resources. Now, it's kind of obvious if you think about it, because there's you, and then there's the entire rest of reality, including the reality that's within you that you don't understand. But it's still something completely different to have that pushed in your face like that. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the propositions, basically up until the time this line of research started, was that you operate in the world with a certain set of assumptions. You see the world and you interact with it, and the things that you're interacting and that you see are real, and it's relatively straightforward matter to perceive them because there they are like things, and you can interact with them in a manner that produces a predictable outcome, and if something radical happens, you will automatically attend to it. So that was the proposition of psychological theory, psychophysiological theory, for a very long period of time, and it had a huge influence on fields like artificial intelligence before they discovered that it was virtually impossible to perceive the world. It's so complex that we can't really figure out how we do it, although, you know, in the last 5 years, tremendous strides have been made in having machines that can actually operate in the real world, which is something new and absolutely remarkable and amazing. So, but what the bottom line for this turned out to be that, no, you don't see the world. You see a subset of the world, and which subset you see depends on your intent. Now, of course, that's obvious from this video, right? Because your intent when you're watching the video is to count the number of balls that are being passed back and forth, and that intent occurred merely because I asked you to do that. And so one of the things that indicates is how easy it is for you to shift what your goal is. You know, and human beings are unbelievably good at that. Now, for most animals, goals are driven in some sense by the operation of underlying fundamental biological systems. They're not just goals, they're whole schemes of perception and action. They're like little sub-personalities, I would say, in that they're embodied, perceptual, cognitive, and emotional solutions to classic biological problems. So they're like, it's like an animal's head is full of little robots. And it's not like they're driven by a motivational system. The motivational system is a sub-element of the animal that participates in the entire animal's being. So if an animal is hungry, then it sees the things that hungry animals see. And it responds emotionally to the cues that are associated with food or its absence. And it thinks, insofar as an animal thinks and strategizes, and some of them do, like the hunters in particular, or the pack hunters, then it strategizes from within that framework. And so you can't think about it as a drive, you have to think about it as an entire way of looking at the world, and then you kind of have to think of the animal as a collection of different ways of looking at the world in accordance with the different problems that the animal has. And then you're like that too, except as your cortex grew radically over the last several million years, you underwent this same weird transformation where your time span got extremely broad and your capacity for abstraction increased. And one of the consequences of that was that you learned how to replace what you might regard as purely biologically determined, relatively immediate goals, although they're really personalities, with unbelievably abstract goals that could be manifested in a social environment and that might work over very long periods of time. And that's a whole different thing. And so what the upshot of that is you have a system that allows you to formulate virtually any frame of reference imaginable, and then to look through the world and act on the world in accordance with that frame of reference, so that I can just say to you, your task, now this is going to be something you value, your task is to turn yourself into a personality for whom counting the basketball throws for the next 5 minutes is your primary aim in life. And you do that no problem. You reconfigure your entire perceptual system so that you feel inadequate to some degree if you can't perform the task. You're motivated to do it. You focus your perceptions. You're pleased if you can track the balls. You're pleased if you get the right answer. And you do that at the drop of a hat. So that's one of the consequences of human cognitive transformation. So